The FGC has given the world a lot of different things to gush about. If it wasn't for Street Fighter 2, I don't know how many cool games would be invented today. If it wasn't for Evo Moment 37, I don't know how many people would be into competitive gaming as a whole. And if it wasn't for tier lists, I don't know how many YouTubers would have a job. It's practically impossible to avoid these things nowadays. And you'd think that fighting games would abandon them after they found a more better, in-depth way to categorize their characters, but you'd be dead wrong. These things are everywhere nowadays. It's gotten to the point where I personally like to play a game called How Long Until Tier List Season, in which I sit and wait and count the days until I see another tier list about Guilty Gear Strive. I haven't made it past a month. But there's something very important about these images that I think that everyone forgets. Something that I need to remind the entire world of right now. They don't actually matter. Why is that? Why should you ignore tier lists? Are they ever useful? And who are they useful for? Well, let's discuss that. Let's talk about why tier lists don't matter for most people. But first, a word from our sponsor, Opera GX. Opera GX is on a mission to make browsers fun and interesting again. Tired of your standard, same old browser, which you could customize it to your liking? Well, that's where Opera GX comes in. Through the GX store, you can find a bunch of free and fun mods for your browser, all with their own custom background music, keyboard and tab sound effects, as well as stunning visuals and beautiful themes. They're also highly customizable, allowing you to edit them to your own liking. Look, they've even got a Guilty Gear one. My favorite feature of the browser is the video pop-out feature. As someone who spends a lot of time staring at scripts, being able to take whatever video that I'm currently watching and put it in the corner of my screen is very helpful. If you're worried about getting all of your old bookmarks over from your old browser, then don't. In just a few quick clicks, all of the important bookmarks, browsing history, and cookies that you have are all imported over to Opera GX. So what are you waiting for? Get rid of your boring old browser and download Opera GX today. Thank you once again to Opera GX for sponsoring the video. Now let's get back to it. So, let's make sure that everyone's on the same page. What is a tier list? Tier lists are images made to display the relative power of different characters in a fighting game. That, in the FGC, is generally what a tier list is. However, you may also just know them as the more casual standard version, where you rank how good something is versus how bad something is. The closer that something is to the top of a tier list is how good it is, and the closer it is to the bottom means that it's generally worse than everything else. You may notice that most tier lists have different colors to distinguish which tiers are which, as well as the relative S, A, B, C, and D tier. Why is that? Because these are all the defaults on tierlistmaker.com. But the main thing that we need to know is that they're all over fighting games, they look like this, and they show the relative power of different characters in different games. That's it. Pretty simple, right? So, why are they so popular? Why are tier lists seemingly everywhere within the FGC? The biggest reason that they're so popular, apart from the fact that they're extremely easy to make, is the fact that they are genuinely a pretty good way to display basic information about a fighting game. By just having a glance at one of these things, you can easily tell where the person who made it thinks that characters stack against each other. It's a super nice, easy, concise way to show exactly what you need, and it doesn't require a lot of details. Tier lists are very nice and very easy. That's why we see them literally everywhere. However, there is a massive downside with the fact that they are everywhere and they're so easy to make. It's not uncommon for different games to have multiple conflicting tier lists for different regions, or even by different people within the same region. But why is that? Why can so many people make these and they all conflict so much? It's a fucking opinion. Here's the thing that I don't think a lot of people really understand. Tier lists are not made by objective facts. The person making the tier list is going to have their own influence over what the tier list is, and that's going to be based off of their own experience and their own playstyle. If we have two people who make a tier list, and person A absolutely fucking hates Testament, Testament is going to be higher up on person A's tier list than person B's. Hell, some tier lists come from people who don't play characters very often, so they have no idea where to put them. If your region doesn't have a strong Bedman in it, you're not going to know how to fight Bedman. What I'm trying to say is that tier lists are extremely subjective. People make their own tier lists because it's how they see the game. Several people will claim that their tier list is the only tier list you need to listen to. However, that is not the case. It is simply their experience with the game. It's extremely rare to find a tier list that is based entirely off of data, and even then, the data that you collect can be flawed. And there's a pretty big reason for that. You see, tier lists are not one static thing. You cannot have a perfect tier list for one specific game, because player skill matters a lot, and tier lists completely ignore that. It's a well-known fact that some characters in games are noob stompers. They are there to check your knowledge to see if you know how to fight against them, and if you don't, you are going to lose. That's how it is. So, if you were to take a tier list from a lower skilled player versus a higher skilled player, that character will have drastically different results based on whose tier list it is. This goes the same way with high execution or complex characters. As in the mind of lower skilled players, they're just too hard to actually be viable. If you can't do half of the special moves in the game, you're not gonna be playing Zato very well now, are you? Most modern fighting games are balanced in such a way where a character is never going to carry a worse player to victory just because they're really strong. Don't get me wrong, they're not perfectly balanced. There's definitely characters who are worse than others, but the diversity between the top tiers and the bottom tiers are much better than they've been in some older games. It's pretty common knowledge in Guilty Gear Strive that you can cook with any character. There's not really such a thing as a bottom tier character. I would personally say that Baikon's pretty shit right now. However, I know for a objective fact that you can perform really well with her. Testament's in a similar boat. A lot of Testament players say that Testament is better after the buffs, but not really that good. And yet still, you can cook with Testament. I know some of you are pointing at the screen going, Zotum won! Zato got second in a major recently. Shut the fuck up. Most of the time, the idea of a bottom tier in a modern fighting game doesn't actually matter that much. So I'm not sure if you've noticed, but that's the reasons that you should ignore them. The fact that they're subjective and personal means that you can never get really reliable information out of them. They completely ignore the skills of the players and are generally aimed at the top end of the fighting game. And if someone's more of an amateur player and they make a tier list, it's going to be very fucking different. And most importantly, most fighting games are balanced in such a way that you can compete with any character nowadays. So why do people get drawn to them so much? Well, two reasons. The first reason is pretty obvious, and you've probably already thought of it. A lot of people like to find excuses on why they lose. You already know the person, the guy who mains the low tier, and every time you fight him, he has the perfect option select to get out. If you beat him, well, I'm playing fucking Nekoa. I'm playing the worst character in the game. I wish they'd buff my character. It's so hard. And then they beat you and suddenly it's eat shit! People like to have a nice, easy option to say that they lost. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, this will lead to downplaying and people insisting that their character is nowhere near as good as people say it is. The other one is also pretty simple. People want to play strong characters. A lot of people look at tier lists and see the upper echelon of characters and believe that if they pick them, they are instantly going to win. They are going to perform objectively better than everyone else. And while it is true that the unanimously agreed top tiers of any fighting game do have an easier time of winning than the bottom tiers, no. No. Like I said before, there's always those characters that absolutely stomp on noobs because they have such a weird playstyle that you need to just know how to beat. It doesn't matter how strong your character is perceived in the eyes of everyone. You don't know how to beat Potemkin, you're gonna lose to it. So what should you pick instead? The one that you think is cool. Don't give a fuck about how good or how bad they are. Play the goddamn game. You're always gonna have opinions on how good or how bad characters are, but if you think a character's broken and everyone else is saying that they're kind of just mid, learn the matchup. And if you think a character is broken and everyone is saying that they're broken, you should still learn the fucking matchup. Trust me, playing a character that you find fun is better than playing a character that's top tier and then getting confused on why you're losing. Unless, of course, it's an old game, in which case, pick a fucking top tier. Thank you all for watching. I'm doing September right now over on my Twitch. We've got a bunch of silly things that I'm working towards. I had to drink Pilk on Tuesday. I'm streaming right now, doing some Guilty Gear Strive viewer matches in the park. It's going to be a good time. It's going to be fun. Hopefully I can see you all there. If not, I'll see you all next week. As always, a very special thanks to 64MHz, Almost Nap Time, Axolotl, Syndicate, Daniel Wiedericht, Edison Lottery, Fexo, Games.png, Haywire Novalee, Hoffmeister Bear, I Am Naoto, It's Riley, Knife and Spoon, Criticat MP04, Mr. Clen, Nubus, Ray W, Sergeant Cubby, Super, Storm SSB, Tom Tanks, Velvet Puppy, and Zandatsu for being Tier 2 patron supporters.